Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to the last round after 1 week off last week. We apologize for not being here. It was actually Mike's idea. He's like, I don't feel like doing it that week. No, I'm just kidding. We just took a break. I think just as it was people were on vacation. It was a slow week in boxing and slow boxing news. So we were like, I think we've been going several weeks in a row. So we decided to take a week off. So please don't be pissed off at us. If you're pissed off at us, oh, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Hopefully you're still listening, but we appreciate it. Whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Boxing Socials, YouTube channel, wherever you're at, however you're listening, we definitely and consistently appreciate it. This week, we have a brand new guest here on the last round for the first time ever. He's a boxing writer for BigFightWeekend.com and the co-host of the Making the Champions podcast. Marquis Johns joins us here on the last round. Thank you so much for joining us, Marquis.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me on. It's good to be on. Finally, guys, talk some boxing for once.
Right, we appreciate it. We have, like we mentioned just before we started recording, we've been meaning to reach out to you for a while to get you on. We like to expand our guest list as much as we can and kind of look at different people and like, oh, okay, I think they'd be good. Obviously it's easier. You have a show, so when you have a guest, it's a lot easier when the guest is talkative and they're knowledgeable about the sport. It makes your job easier as the interviewer, right?
Absolutely. And it's funny when you have guests on and they give you like the short answers and you lay like the question out and it's like, it's so irritating. And I can tell you this because by being on way too many boxing media calls where people will say like this great like narrative. It's like, hey, you're fighting so-and-so on Saturday. It's going to be a great time. What do you think about it? I'm going to put my best effort. It just deflates everything. It's ridiculous.
Right. Yeah, we've definitely been there, but hey, it's our job to try to keep the flow going as much as we can. So it is what it is. With more experience comes better technique, of course. So, yeah. But jumping right into it, fight reviews from this past weekend, a rare Friday card, the 9th of July from the Bank of California Stadium here in Los Angeles on DAZN. Gilberto Ramirez remains undefeated at 42-0 with the fourth round KO over Sullivan Barrera. Barrera was down in rounds 3 and 4. Marquis, did you catch this main event? And if you did, what'd you think about it?
Oh, of course I caught this. This was the only game in town this weekend, guys. And it's funny that the best boxing card they had on this weekend was on a Friday and not the actual weekend itself. No, it was a fun card up and down. Sullivan Barrera in the main event pretty much did what he had to do against Gilberto Ramirez against Sullivan Barrera. Had to do pretty much against him for the most part, and which is, and pretty much Barrera was coming up from 168 to 175. I mean, he's kind of past it, guys, at this point. And I mean, I didn't expect too much from him in the ring on this. And Ramirez confirmed that, and with the fourth round stoppage, pretty much controlling the entire fight. I mean, there wasn't too much out of the ordinary. I'm more intrigued now that why couldn't we get this version of Ramirez like I don't know, like any fight ago, as opposed to what we got this past Friday?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's good that he's back in the game because obviously he went through that rift with Top Rank and kind of leaving them. And I think I read somewhere that he still owes them like $1 million. So like every purse that he gets from this point forward, they get a cut until that $1 million is satisfied, which sucks. But I mean, wow. it got him out of the contract and as a free agent in a sense. Now he's with Golden Boy Promotions. I think he needed that KO because I was like, he can't go to a decision with Barrera. He has to knock him out. Having over 40 wins and none of the opponents in none of those names on his list of 42 wins are, stand out as victories. He needed a KO just to kind of stay relevant. And then they talked about Dimitri Bivol who's obviously also has difficulty landing a big name. And he has a belt at 175 pounds. So they're talking about making that fight, which I don't see why you can't make that fight. They're both under the DAZN banner in a sense. Mike, what do you think about the main event?
Like you said, I think Ramirez kind of did what he did. I thought Barrera, on paper, looks a good name, but then when you looked at the performance, I think you can see, he was looking every inch. Those 39 years old, and the body work was good, beautiful shot. I mean, when he landed it, you could kind of tell. You're like, oh, that's a good one. It's a heavy one. But yeah, going forward, I think Gilberto Ramirez has been the worst thing for Gilberto Ramirez. Just pricing himself out of fights when he was with Top Rank. So, he really going forward, Oscar keeps talking about, getting into 51-0. And I think it was actually on the screen when he was coming down to the ring. They were flashing up like 51-0. But is it going to be 51-0 against what? A bunch of taxi drivers? Are we going to see him, get to 51-0, fight in the upper echelons of that division? I hope so. But in reality, probably not.
Marquis, what do you think about the signing when Golden Boy and Oscar De La Hoya signed Gilberto Ramirez? What was your reaction when you heard that news?
I was intrigued only because I didn't see it coming, and I didn't think Golden Boy was actually still signing talent at this point, because guys, I'm still trying to figure out what network are these cards going to be on in 3 months for these guys. They vaguely explained that for the most part. They have a DAZN card next month. There's this Triller card with Oscar De La Hoya in this exhibition in September. That's it. Like, there's nothing else afterwards. So I'm really intrigued on that they was able to still sign people. And I think that this is one of those chips that they're going to use in terms of with Ramirez to hopefully land one of these title fights like a Bivol, hopefully. Because Ramirez at this point, he can't. Yeah, as you mentioned, Mike, you can't be fighting any more of these Uber drivers at this point. There's got to be actual names that we can fight. You could actually rattle off at this point instead of the Barreras and the Joe Capernices of the world. There's got to be actual bodies he has to face at this point. And Bivol's right for the picking, and he's running this. He has the same problem too, running into the same domestic no-name opponents. I think Bivol's last fight was against Ronald Riches, and if memory serves me well, guys, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't that the guy that wears the bee costume over there? So
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what are we doing here? So these guys got to figure it out and get together and at least come to some sort of fight. Hopefully, they can make that happen really soon. Actually, you'll be shocked they haven't really got that ball rolling yet. Honestly,
right. I mean, like, it's not like Ramirez. I think he's still. I don't even think he's 30, or if he is, he's at 30 years old. So he still has a lot of years left in his career. Barring any significant injuries, obviously. But Marquis, what do you think that Golden Boy, since they lost Canelo, obviously, they picked up Ramirez, and they, De La Hoya has mentioned in interviews in the last few weeks, obviously, especially, and I think during the signing of Ramirez that, the plan is, get Ramirez a couple wins, get him to like 50-0 or 50 wins and 51-0 or something like that. And then, get him in there with like the likes of Canelo and stuff like that. Do you think this is kind of like a bargaining chip for Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy in terms of trying to get Ramirez to a point where he can probably get a Canelo fight at maybe 175 or 168?
It possibly would, but the thing with Canelo is, if he's waiting for a Canelo fight, he's going to be waiting a long time on that one. To be honest with you guys, between whatever Canelo does that with his next fight, if it's Plant or Golovkin, what they're mentioning for the third time, because I think honestly, guys, I think both those fights happen just because. And after that, who knows? Does Canelo stay at 168 and defend all these belts with all the sanctioning fees behind it, or does he move back up again and plays weight hopscotch? So I don't. He's at the mercy of that. I just think with Ramirez signing with Golden Boy, guys, is that it's a bargaining chip that they can use to hopefully land a. If they move to a different network of some sort, they can say that, hey, we got these guys on our roster. I mean, they have Ramirez, or they have as a title contender. They have Ryan Garcia whenever he checks back in. They have Virgil Ortiz. They have a couple of pieces there, and hopefully they can just build from that and keep going. I mean, they have my personal favorite, Blair Cobbs, who just is just amusing because he's just fun to watch and just fight wise. I mean, he's not anything that's going to take on the likes of like the world title contenders at 147, but styles make fights, and this style is a fun one.
It's interesting because I can't remember where I read the rumor, but there was a rumor that Golden Boy were going to sign like a deal with Top Rank, and they were going to join them on ESPN and kind of intermingle their stables. I can't remember where I read the story, but if that's true, that's good because Ramirez, all the top contenders at his weight division are over on that side of the street. So if that's true, that's good for him. If not, then he's at one of those places where our top rank going to do him any favors, and give him access to a lot of people in the light heavyweight division. Obviously, there's a few over in England, like Joshua Buatsi, and then obviously there's the rest of them are probably over with Frank Warren. So interesting times if he actually does want to fight the best in the division.
Yeah, that's interesting for you. I mean, I think I've read that same story too. The only problem with that story, Mike, that doesn't make any sense to me. And if Top Rank and Golden Boy, formed and merged into this, super bond, whatever have you, where are all these guys going to fight? Because like this last card on Friday that DAZN had, pretty much 90% of these Golden Boy fighters pretty much that didn't make the DAZN portion of this were pretty much on the Facebook Live, and it was like a 6-hour marathon of cards. So there's going to be a lot of real estate, and ESPN Plus has a lot of these Top Rank undercards too, and their fighters. And let's not act like Top Rank doesn't sign everybody and their grandma. So I'm trying to figure out where the real. There's going to be it's going to turn into a Saturday Night Live kind of grasping for airtime kind of deal with all these fighters on just one channel. So, but if they do merge, it would create a couple more matches, but I do wonder if that would create more of the matches that we actually would see, guys. That's the big thing that I always wonder, because it's cool to have all these fighters because Top Rank, Golden Boy. Don't forget the Queensberry Association as well as the MTK Association. I mean, it's about pretty much everybody not named on PBC at this point in Matchroom, but it's quite a bit, and I'm really hoping, and if that story is true, maybe this will actually put more things actually on ESPN's table and kind of forces their hand a little bit to make ESPN, I don't know, put boxing a little bit on the forefront. But the problem with that is that we're approaching NFL football season here in the States. So I don't know how true that really would be.
ESPN Plus. Right. ESPN Plus.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that'd be an interesting turn of events if you see somebody like Golden Boy and Top Rank kind of merge or institute some type of significant partnership between the two. I think, wasn't it last year or I'm not sure when exactly, but I feel like it was fairly recently, within the last year or just maybe it was just before the pandemic. I'm not sure. But wasn't there a picture of Bob Arum, De La Hoya, and I believe Eric Gomez? I think Bob Arum came in to visit in LA.
Yeah, that picture was actually this year. I think that was the weekend of the Ryan Garcia, Luke Campbell fight, where they were at the dinner table and there was this weird salad bowl and they were all just staring at it. It was kind of weird, but
yeah. I mean, that can maybe add some type of fuel to that conversation. Maybe they invited Bob Arum over and they proposed an idea like, hey, what do you think about if we partner up, promoter and promoter, and you can use our fighters on your platform? Because I mean, I think we all know how fighter contracts work. Like the promoter has to at least have some dates for these fighters. They have to offer them, or at least propose some dates for these fighters, and they have to produce a certain amount of fights for them and bouts for them according to their contracts. So I believe you touched on in Marquis how De La Hoya is supposed to fight in September or something on that Triller card, and then Teofimo Lopez is kind of involved in it, and then there's drama over there. De La Hoya is trying to leverage his star power to get some dates on Triller for his fighters, which I understand. But then but nobody knows how Triller is actually going to sustain itself. It's kind of still there, but it seems like it's always going to be pay-per-view. So is that going to hurt the visibility of its fighters? So I mean, what do you think about that situation?
I'm just convinced, guys, that Triller at this point is just doing what they're just doing what reverse Eddie Hearn at this point, where Eddie Hearn for like the last 6 to 8 weeks has been saying there's going to be a major fight announcement, and we're still waiting on that, guys. So and the Triller's doing the complete opposite, saying, hey, we're going to have these fights here, there, and everywhere, like the Michael Hunter card at MSG in August on this weird fight camp series thing. Whenever they figure out to fight the Teofimo Lopez and Kambosos, obviously he does want to go across overseas to Australia where the money is going to be at. So we'll see what happens with all of that. My thing with Triller is that they haven't produced enough cards to show that they're going to keep doing this going forward. That's my big concern. Where it's like that, and also to piggyback your point is that they're behind this paywall, and it's Fight TV, guys. I mean, Fight TV is not the easiest app to get if you don't know how to get it. Like, it's just one of those things, but hopefully they can all sort that all out. Maybe because I'm a cynic and I've been doing this too long. The skeptic in me doesn't think too many of these Triller cards go off and without some sort of hiccup or hitch or another one of these push-ponements. I'm just not that high on these Triller cards. I mean, they got the first two off so far, the Mike Tyson, Roy Jones, and then the Jake Paul stuff, but all those guys are gone and want no part of this anymore. So where there's smoke, there's fire. And I just don't see how they can make this a very sustainable thing actually at this point. And if they're only doing it solely on these fights, I mean, guys, Michael Hunter versus White the Light's not it. So they got to do something drastic and interesting fast.
Right, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. Rounding off the Ramirez talk here, Marquis. Like we mentioned, Bivol and him seem to be on some type of collision course. It seems likely to happen, a lot more likely than some of these other fights that they're talking about, because both of these guys need each other. They need names. It's going to be a title fight. So I want to see it. I think it's a good matchup. What do you think? What's your take on that potential matchup between Ramirez and Bivol?
Personally, for those two guys, that has to be the next fight for them. Where it's like I don't want to see these guys would ever stay busy opponents at this point. We've already seen that. We've seen that with Ramirez ad nauseum, and we've seen it at this point with Bivol for God knows how long now. At this point, since he beat Joe Smith. So at this point, either fight elite competition or just wait till that elite competition is available. And at this point, both these guys are available. I hope they figure it out and get this fight done. I don't care how it gets done. I don't even care where the fight's at. They can fight in Saudi Arabia. They can fight at the freaking North Pole for all I care. As long as there's this fight in the ring somewhere, I just want to see it happen.
Right. Yeah. Mike, what do you think about a potential matchup between Bivol and Ramirez?
Good fight if it gets made. Just seems like Bivol's either being avoided or maybe he's the avoider. You never know. I think Ramirez is massively overrated. I always thought that when he was at top rank. I think Bivol probably deals with him. Not a big fan of Ramirez so far.
Well, I think this is, like I mentioned, maybe countering your point, maybe Ramirez, I said they both need each other equally. But I mean, if you kind of go off of your opinion, maybe Ramirez needs Bivol more than Bivol needs Ramirez. I mean, who knows? But let me ask you this, Mike. If Ramirez comes in and beats Bivol, does he gain your respect?
That last performance with Bivol wasn't great, but he's had a lot of time out of the ring. So is Ramirez, I guess. I mean, if they're both get in there, they're both 100%. He beats him, then he's the better man on the night. Then obviously, I'm wrong, but I thought that about Jose Ramirez, and then he beat Maurice Hooker and get a great performance against Josh Taylor. So I've been wrong before. Just once, but I've been wrong before.
as long as you admit it when you're wrong, that's all that matters. That's all that matters. Well, you could be wrong on this show. We're okay with that. Moving on to my favorite fight of the night, the one I was definitely looking forward to. Joseph Jojo Diaz gets the 32nd win of his career for the WBC interim lightweight title, and gets the 12-round unanimous decision win over Javier Fortuna. As we know, and as a lot of our listeners know, Diaz actually was volunteered to take Ryan Garcia's spot. This was originally supposed to be Ryan Garcia versus Javier Fortuna, and then Ryan Garcia had some issues he had to deal with and backed out of the fight. And then Joseph Diaz, I remember he put on Twitter and social media, he's like, "Hey, I'll take it." And I think within a week or two, it seemed like it was fairly fast. Diaz was inserted into that opportunity and made the most of it. He got the win. Marquis, what'd you think about Jojo's performance?
I thought it was pretty good for Jojo Diaz, considering that his last fight was that weird draw with Rachmanov, and he lost a belt in the scale. I was expecting, guys, this fight to be an absolute snoozer. This draw, and before, and I wrote about it on Twitter last week, and I'm being hounded in my DMs about it afterwards because I was wrong. I thought this fight had draw written all over it, like up and down. Like I figured Jojo Diaz wouldn't be able to keep Fortuna off of him, but Fortuna wasn't going to punch enough to keep the fight moving along. I really thought it was going to be one of those boring chess matches, and I was wrong. Pretty much, it was actually pretty good. And actually, Diaz was just able to beat Fortuna to the punch throughout the entire fight, which I thought was the difference. I thought the scores were a little wide, but I mean, it's California and Lou Moret's in attendance, so I mean, those things are bound to happen. But no, for Jojo, I thought it was a really good opponent. Chance, it was a great opportunity for him, and I'm actually intrigued now to see if he stays at 135, because at this point, he's pretty much all but locked in for this Haney fight, isn't he, guys?
I believe so. Yeah, with the interim title, I think he's a mandatory for Devin Haney, right?
Yeah, because I think, not to cut you off, but I want to say originally, but during this pandemic, and I'm I'm trying to follow the WBC timeline, so forgive me in advance. Devin Haney was at one point pretty much given 2 mandatories. One was Ryan Garcia. One was Javier Fortuna. Ryan Garcia backed out. Javier Fortuna just lost. So there's got to be someone to replace these spots, and that's where Jojo Diaz steps up. I'm hoping I'm hoping Marcio in the WBC rankings committee does it right, but it's the fight to make, hopefully. But I'm intrigued because I thought for Jojo this was a really good showing for him.
Mike, what'd you think about Jojo's performance?
I agree with Marquis. Jojo is definitely one of those fighters that seems to fight better in the bigger fights. You know, when he fought Gary Russell, he lost, but I think most people thought that was a good performance from him. This fight against Javier Fortuna, I thought was definitely, a really good fight, because how many times have we seen him at Fantasy Springs Casino where, when he fought like Charles Huerta and stuff like that, and you're just thinking like, what is he doing? He just has no power, eventually got him out of there, but there's levels to this game, and he should have been levels and levels above him. So, yeah, he's definitely one of those guys that seems to fight to the level, like Tevin Farmer last year. Another great performance. Yeah. I thought he looked good aesthetically, walking to the ring. I thought he looked big, muscular, chunky. You could see, like, all the striations in his back and stuff like that. He obviously had, a good camp. I thought he had a little bit more pop. I thought his performance, he actually sat down a little bit more on his punches, which I thought was good. And it was a good fight. Javier Fortuna is always in a good fight. He just comes to scrap, and he just doesn't let you rest. Like Marquez was saying, he just kind of walks you down. So, I thought it was a good performance, but I think you just got to make sure that, Jojo stays in the right headspace. He seems to be his own worst enemy, trying to run his own camps because, he's with his dad instead of, being with Joel Diaz. Obviously came in overweight last time. So, if he's got in the right headspace, sticks to some training, there's some big, big fights. Great idea to move up to that division, because look at all the people he can fight now. So, for his legacy and also for his pocket, it was a very wise decision.
Yeah, no, I think he stays. I think he stays at 135. And then also going back to we mentioned about his power. He doesn't really have that KO power that some other fighters between 130 and 135 have. But what I really like about Jojo is his placement of shots. He's very technical, especially with his body work. He showed off his body work this past weekend against Fortuna. So his placement of shots, I think, help to negate the fact that his power isn't where it should be. So I'm a fan of the guy. I think that as compared to others, like in a fight we're going to talk about in just a minute or so, the Tanahara Zepeda fight, Tanahara is kind of the same way. He has no power. He's mostly like a box and move guy. Most of his wins have been by decision. But I feel like in comparison between somebody like Tanahara and Jojo Diaz's power, I feel like Diaz has a little bit more pop because of the placement of his punches, that he's still able to keep his opponent off of him, until he meets another fighter who just has that ridiculous power, like a Tank Davis or something. But, I'm glad that he stepped up and he got the win, and now he's in, like Marquis mentioned, he should be the mandatory for Devin Haney. I know they were going back and forth on Twitter a little bit subsequent to the fight. And then they both said, let's fight in October. And then they said November, because I think Jojo needs to heal from the cut that he got. Yeah. So I hope it happens. I don't see why it wouldn't happen. They're both Haney's technically a free agent right now, but he still wants to work with Eddie Hearn from what I've seen in reports. So I could see it happening, especially if he can't get a Ryan Garcia, if Devin Haney can't get a Ryan Garcia or anything like that. I can see Jojo. Jojo's always been that guy who's like, he steps up. He's had his moments where he's missed weight, and like Mike mentioned, he's his own worst enemy at times during his career. But then he comes back and he beats Tevin Farmer. He wins the title. He loses the belt on the scale, and then he comes back to replace Ryan Garcia, and he beats a guy in a new division at 135 pounds. And now with that win, he's in the mix with all these bigger names now. So I'm a fan, maybe because like I've been watching him since he was on the LA Fight Club circuit here in Los Angeles. So I saw him fight, in front of 200 people and stuff like that, since he was like 20 21 or whatever. So maybe I'm a little biased, but I'm a fan of the guy, and I'm glad that Golden Boy never really gave up on him for as many ups and downs as he had. And hopefully he fights Devin Haney by the end of the year. I mean, what do you think, Mike? You had something to add?
You kind of touched on actually what I was going to say. I was just going to say that I think Jojo, unlike some of the others, will actually fight them. And I think he actually would fight Devin Haney. I think he probably would fight Ryan Garcia. They're on the same side of the street, as they say. And then look at who he's already fought. Gary Russell, best in the division. Tevin Farmer, title holder at the time. So he's kind of proven that he will step up to the plate, and he's already lost. So there's no need to protect that, that mythical O. So
what do you think, Marquis?
Yeah, I think that fight has to happen between Jojo Diaz and Devin Haney. The more I think about it, and then piggyback your point, Mike, actually is like in terms of fight resumes. And I'm not a big fight resume guy, only because you're only stuck with the person you're fighting in front of you at the time it happened. People don't remember that Maurice Hooker was supposed to face someone actually of competition when he moved up to 147, but instead fought a guy on that Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. card on a week's notice and won in like one round. Like no one's gonna remember any of that stuff. I mean, I have to because that's what I do, but no one else does. And it's one of those fights where, like in terms of Haney's resume, I think a win, if he was to beat Jojo Diaz, that would be a better win personally, in my opinion, than him in this last fight, beating Jorge Linares. So I really think it's one of those kind of fights where I'd be really shocked it doesn't happen for Devin Haney unless Ryan Garcia comes out of the woodworks. That's the only name that the wildcard I can throw out to you guys. But outside of that, because we don't know what Ryan Garcia is going to do, for all I know, wasn't he supposed to like filming a movie at some point? No one knows what this guy does. So we're at the mercy of him and his Instagram. But once we figure him back in the ring, we'll be good. But I really think it's going to be Haney, Jojo Diaz at some point.
What do you think about that matchup, Marquis? Potential.
I think it's a fun one. I want to see if Haney can actually keep the same stick and move he did against Linares for the most part against Jojo, because I don't think Jojo's going to give him the same leeway to pretty much fight from like range. That's the one thing I'm looking forward to seeing about that. It may be a fight that Haney has a possibility of actually losing, truth be told, because he has the ability. That's one of those fights where Haney has the ability to be outboxed, and that's the one thing that we have not seen from Haney in terms of like in the ring against the competition he's faced. The Linares and the the Gamboas and the Morans, where he's just pretty much just dancing circles around these old guys. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that all shakes out.
Mike, what do you think about a potential matchup between Devin Haney and Jojo Diaz?
Interesting matchup, because I think we've seen both of them really adapt different styles at time. Jojo really used to box from the outside, kind of more of your stereotypical amateur for performance. But then I thought when he fought Tevin Farmer in this recent fight, I thought you could see him sitting down a little bit more on his punches. But, if you go for his natural performance, he kind of boxes from the outside, throws a lot of combinations. Where Devin, tries to be kind of a little bit more slick. Kind of more of that Floyd Mayweather style. So, yeah, it'd definitely be interesting. I think it'd be a close fight as well, like Marquis touched on. If they both, choose a good game plan going into it. Very, very close one. And I think it's honestly realistic as well.
Yeah. I think it's definitely a lot more than realistic, and it should happen. I mean, I don't know. I don't see why it wouldn't. And I would expect it to, as long as, if Ryan Garcia jumps in the mix and says like, "Oh, Haney, I want to fight you. I want to fight for the title." I'm sure Haney's going to want to fight Garcia because it's more eyeballs for his event and more money. But assuming Ryan Garcia doesn't want that fight, I can see him and Jojo Diaz fighting sometime in the fall, which would be definitely a good fight. And I think it's a pretty even fight, because what a lot of people don't remember about Jojo Diaz is that he was on the 2012 Olympic team with Errol Spence, Clarissa Shields, and Jamel Herring. And I believe in Doug Fisher's, the editor-in-chief of the Ring magazine, and his recent mailbag series that he does, every couple of weeks or on a weekly basis, something like that. He had answered a question in regards to Jojo Diaz, and I believe he said that, and I'm kind of just paraphrasing here, but I believe he said that Jojo Diaz behind Errol Spence was like had the second most potential to, like, in the pros. I don't know how they measured that, but it was like Errol Spence and then Jojo Diaz, like in terms of like the impact they would have in the professional ranks. It was something along the lines that I gotta go back and see what exactly it read, but I thought that was very interesting to read. Because I always forget that he was on the Olympic team in 2012. Just going back to Mike's point earlier, he's his own worst enemy. I mean, sometimes he on social media, he'll post things. I feel like he puts out everything he's thinking sometimes. And you can kind of just read between the lines, like, hey, obviously there's something going on, hopefully it works out. But when he's focused and when he's determined, I think he's one of the best fighters between 130 and 135, but he just has to keep that consistency. And then if he comes back and fights Devin Haney before the end of the year and beats Devin Haney and gets a title at 135, that definitely puts him in the mix for a big payday. 135 is arguably, one of the most lucrative divisions in all of boxing right now. So we got Ryan Garcia, you got a Tank Davis, you got Devin Haney, all these names between 130 and 135. When you expand it, you got more names. But yeah, man. Hopefully that fight happens. I think it's a pretty even fight. And I would definitely look forward to it. I could see it happening, especially on DAZN. So we'll see how it goes as time moves forward. Also on that card, Seniesa Estrada remains undefeated at 21-0 with the 10-round unanimous decision win over the Tsunami for the WBO light flyweight title. Marquis, what do you think about Estrada's performance?
I thought Estrada looked good, guys, and she's been looking good for these past few fights. Like, she's almost looking pretty much indestructible at this point, at least just in terms of women's boxing. And I'm really intrigued with the way she she pretty much just mauled this lady for over 10 rounds. And it brings up a bigger question, guys, because I've been seeing it happens every women's championship fight, and you guys see this over and over again. At some point, they're going to expand this crap to 3-minute rounds. And then this is one of those fights. If this was a 3-minute round fight, this wouldn't have went the distance. This is just one of those things that you can just tell that there's just no way if they had 10 more minutes that she was going to survive any of this.
I think I read, and I don't know if you guys tell me if I'm wrong, but I think I read somewhere that Estrada's team asked Tsunami to go make this fight 3-minute rounds. I think they offered to pay her or something, but I think Tsunami and her team declined. Do I remember reading that? I feel like I saw that somewhere. That
sounds familiar. I think you may have read that somewhere, which is very disappointing if you really think about it, because considering how many women are out in the forefront, complaining about 3-minute rounds, and then she's just like, well, we didn't train for the extra 10 minutes, so no. Yeah. It's like, well,
I think that's a reasonable, a reasonable explanation. I mean, they're the fighters, they're the ones training blood, sweat, and tears in that gym. If you're training 2-minute rounds, or your whole training crap is structured around that time frame, and then they offer 3-minute rounds, and you're just like, well, I've already been training in regards to 2 minutes for 7-8 weeks. How I have to get my body accustomed to. I mean, I could see that as a reasonable explanation, or maybe she just didn't want to do 3-minute rounds. She's like, I don't really. Who knows? Only they know. Only them and their teams know. Mike, what do you think about Estrada's performance?
Good performance. She's definitely one of the brightest stars in the female boxing. Just her style. Kind of Roy Jones June-esque. I think it would have been nice to have seen her do the 3-minute rounds. I'm pretty sure she did the 3-minute rounds in Vegas when she fought Marlon Esparza. And it's going to lead to more knockouts, which is going to lead to more exposure, which is going to lead to more money. Yeah. So I know they're already saying, if you watch some interviews, well, if I'm doing 3-minute rounds, I want more money. You're like, well, that comes in time when you guys start knocking each other out, and it gets better. When you start seeing on ESPN, top 10, and one of them's an amazing knockout by Estrada when she smoked that girl in the first round in 3 seconds. It's stuff like that brings the exposure to the sport. Whereas now it'll be like, oh, it's a 10-minute. A 10-round female fight, hey, let's go to the bar because it's going to go 10 rounds. So we'll catch round 8, 9, and 10 after we get back, because they don't knock each other out. So, it's all relative. I think they need to understand that, that when, the stars get better over time, like they did in the UFC, they do, the same amount of time in UFC, the same amount of time in bare knuckle, which is more violent and dangerous than boxing. So why can't they do 3-minute rounds in the same as the men's?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it seems like we're going that route. I mean, hopefully it's soon. It's going to take obviously a major promoter like a Top Rank or Golden Boy or Matchroom to really institute with their female fighters and their female fights. Like, hey, if you're going to be a female and fight under our promotional team, you have to be prepared to fight 3-minute rounds every single time. Once one of these main promoters or they make some type of agreement with these commissions or where they're fighting at to do 3-minute rounds, I think that's the way. That's the only way to step forward where it's going to change the landscape. Because as of right now, it doesn't seem like it's going that direction, or it might be going that direction. It just seems like it's a very slow burn, as you say. But I like Estrada. She's a Los Angeles native here in Southern California. And I think, like Mike touched on, and you tell me what you think about this, Marquis, but when she beat Marlene Esparza, they were both undefeated. They were both Golden Boy fighters and both Mexican-American. And they kind of had that rivalry, that little the promotion leading up to the fight was kind of back and forth. I think that for Estrada really elevated her confidence as a fighter. What do you think?
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think actually with Estrada just as a whole, and to piggyback your point, Mike, about pretty much building up the whole 3-minute round thing, where it's like, I think the landscape of women's boxing has to get better as a whole. And that's going to be a period of time as well, only because everyone that I've seen in terms of women's boxing, which isn't like the usual forefronts, like the Katie Taylors and McCaskills and Estradas and Serranos and whatnot, they're all pretty much in the amateurs or below. So it's going to be that pipeline is coming, but it's going to be a long while for it. But what there is with Estrada is just her appeal. I hope with her appeal, and I think, and this is the one thing that I will give Golden Boy credit for, because they've been putting on a lot of women's fights as well as Matchroom as well. And the one thing they have been doing with, at least with her, I can tell you, is that they put her in the forefront. And I do like that a lot, where they put her on these main cards. She's not buried on the Facebook live feed or the first, the Zone YouTube card that no one pays attention to, none of that stuff. So they're placing her to be seen, and she is being seen. And I just hope that they can just continue that, because I really do think it's like 3 or 4 women that I think can really just push and break through with this, guys. And I want your thoughts on this as well, because I think Estrada is one of them. I think Amanda Serrano is another one. And I think if they can find her an opponent, Jessica McCaskill can be a problem that can just find her an opponent domestically. Those are my 3 where I think if they get these women some more fights and more exposure to everything, that it would help in the grand scheme of things, because these are pretty much and the Michaela Mayers as well. But these are like the fighters that they pretty much in terms of the U.S. they've been putting like in front of our faces. That's not named Carissa Shields. So it's kind of one of those deals where it's like, all right, well, Shields is doing the MMA thing, and now it's everybody else who's going to be the next person to step up, and that's where I think these ladies step up. Those names I mentioned have a chance to do that.
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. With all those names in women's boxing, of course. And then kind of going back to Estrada as well. Estrada, can you see Marquis another rematch with Marlene Esparza? Marlene Esparza obviously just won another title, I believe at 108. I forgot the division. I know it wasn't light flyweight, but I think they asked Estrada. She was asked about it. Are you open to that, since Marlene Esparza did just recently win another title? Would you rematch her? Would you go to that weight class again and try to take her title? I mean, would you want to see another rematch between those two?
Absolutely. That was a fun fight. I wouldn't mind. They can run. If those two can run that back at whatever weight class, I'm all for it. And I do think at some point, though, I'm assuming that Esparza was going to move up to face up. Pretty much, but I'm looking to see if that actually happened. But I know they were both at Bank of California over the weekend. They made eye contact and had some choice words, I'm sure. So the stew is brewing for it to happen again. So I'm looking forward to it.
Mike, would you want to see that rematch between Esparza and Estrada?
Yeah, definitely. It's something that, like you said, it had they had the rows beforehand and after, and during the fight. So yeah, it's something that you need in the women's boxing, like Marquis touched on. You need rivalries to build the sport. When the UFC came around, you had Chuck and Tito going at each other, and that sold the sport. So yeah, they definitely need some rivalries and stuff like that. So like you touched on, it already has the backstory. So. It'll be good, and I'm sure there isn't a huge, vast amount of opponents for her, so it makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I could see them. I could see Golden Boy definitely organizing that rematch again, just because, there's obviously limited opponents, and Estrada keeps winning, and now Esparza just won another title, and she's back in the win column. So, and they're both under the Golden Boy banner. So why not run it back? I could definitely see that. Rounding off this card, I know this was Marquis, you mentioned this was they had like a 6-hour undercard from like 12 noon and stuff like that. So there was actually quite a few fights. So we're not gonna be able to touch on all of them, but we're gonna touch on the most significant ones. William Zepeda remains undefeated at 23-0 as he gets the stoppage against Hector Tanahara of the Robert Garcia Boxing Academy, who takes the first loss of his career. This was for the vacant WBA Continental America's lightweight title. I didn't think, from my personal standpoint, that Zepeda was going to essentially, for lack of a better term, blow out Tanahara the way that he did. He came in with a ton of force and pretty much smothered Tanahara throughout that whole fight, to the point that obviously Robert Garcia and we're not gonna let you continue. Marquis, what did you think about the Zepeda's performance? Excuse me.
I thought it was great, but it's great because he did what he had to do as well, because I didn't realize this until the weigh-in, guys, because everything I was reading up like the week of was like, this was going to be this was supposed to be, this opening fight was like supposed to be like the quote-unquote 50-50 fight, the one close fight before the bell started. And then you saw these two guys at the weigh-in. It's like, oh no, this guy's going to absolutely maul this dude. And that's exactly what happened. So it's intriguing what's going to happen with this. I'm just more intrigued now if they find better opponents for Zepeda at this point. I really thought this wasn't Tanahara's best effort, but he just looked really undersized in there.
Yeah, I agree with that. Mike, what do you think about Zepeda's performance and Tanahara's first professional loss?
Going in, once you saw the size difference, like Marquis said, you kind of thought, geez, that guy looks huge. Yeah. He looked like a couple of weight divisions above him. But then when you kind of looked at it, and like we've touched on several times in here, the building predators coming out of the Robert Garcia gym. You look at some of them and like the sparring they get, like you touch on Danny, and so whatever they're feeding the dudes in that gym. So you kind of thought, well, that guy's from Robert Garcia's gym, so you might have a chance. And then, early on you could just see just too big, too strong. But also, the volume of punches that he threw was amazing as well. He had a great gas tank on him. So it was good to see, though, that like, he was taking some flush shots, and you could see the corner that kind of like pulled him out. It didn't get to the point where you could really hear. I think even the commentators weren't even touching on pulling him out. So it kind of was a surprise, but one of the surprises you kind of agreed with when you thought about it. You thought, he was taking some flush shots, and live to fight another day instead of just going out on your shield just to show how strong you are.
Yeah. Marquis, do you think that Tanahara had a little bit more pop in his shots? Because obviously I touched on earlier how Tanahara doesn't really have that KO power. I think he only has like about 5 KOs in all of the fights that he's had so far in his professional career. Do you think if he had that extra pop to kind of keep Zepeda off of him, do you think it would have been a different outcome, or do you think it still would have ended the same?
I think it would have been the same just because of the volume that he was just being thrown at him. But if he had like the same pop, and I'll give you guys a great comparison, it reminded me a lot if he had the same pop that King Tug had against Chris Colbert to keep him off of him, it would have been a little more competitive. I still think he would have been stopped because he was just thrown at a ridiculous rate, guys. That fight had 6 rounds tops, no matter what was going down. Someone's either going to either get tired or get knocked out, one way or the other. But no, I really think that would have helped Tanahara. But I'm just shocked that he was just so overwhelmed that once it's all said and done, to be honest with you.
I mean, could you guys see a Zepeda and Ryan Garcia fight? I mean, because at one point Tanahara was trying to get the Ryan Garcia fight. I think he was like tweeting at him, and they were kind of going back and forth social media and some other stuff. And there was some type of, unofficial reports that Golden Boy was trying to make that fight, and it just wasn't working out. I mean, could you see maybe Zepeda going against Ryan in the future now, since Ryan seems like he started training again? Marquis?
I don't know if Tanahara's would be the guy, because I just think Ryan Garcia is just trying to find another one of these questionable opponents. Another Fonseca or Roberto Denuda not.
But as he was, we were touching on Mike. I think he's right. I think he touched on Ryan Garcia not having. He might not have a big opponent a big opponent. But Marquis, you're back. Continue your point. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. No, yeah. I really just think that Garcia's is looking for I'm convinced, guys. Honestly, Ryan Garcia is looking for the path of least resistance. And Steve Kim was floating to me over the weekend. He mentions on our podcast last week the name of Yorkis Gamboa. I mean, like, let's not trot that name out ever again, guys. For these guys to fight at this point, we get it. So I'm hoping that with Garcia they actually give him an actual opponent. And if Tanahara is the guy, maybe, but I just think if Garcia doesn't get Devin Haney, the opponent they're going to lame for this guy is, let's be honest, it's going to be, if it's not Haney, we all know it's not going to be Tank Davis. It's going to be disappointing on some level, no matter who it is. But that's just the way it's going to be at this point.
Yeah, he'll do the usual thing, like, you know, he's just come back from an injury as such, right? I guess.
Yeah.
They'll say, you know, he's going to get like a warm up fight. Before he fights someone else, and it'll be a hand-picked opponent because we all know he's not the most talented. He's got that one thing, that one shot. He's kind of like a lightweight Deontay Wilder, as I always kind of describe him. You know, he's not physically good, like physically great, technique-wise, but he's got that kind of like that one shot. And they'll pick someone like handmade for him to try to bleed as much money from the cash cow as they can before, you know, he gets defeated. And I think, you know, mentally with the way that he's been recently, I think his first defeat, I think he'll take really badly.
I agree with that. I think the first defeat, if he does suffer it, obviously in his professional career, which he still has a lot of years ahead of him, he probably will take pretty badly. But the thing is with Ryan and Marquis, you tell me if you agree with this or not. He's very polarizing. He's a polarizing figure in the sport of boxing because he's one of those social media stars right now. He hangs out with with the Paul brothers and a lot of these other social media stars, and he has a big following. You know, a lot of young people, especially a lot of young girls, teenage girls, and stuff like that. They follow him. You know, that's his fan base. But he's polarizing also because, like Mike mentioned, he has that one shot that. You know, that power punch where he can end the fight. He showed against Luke Campbell. Yeah. Luke Campbell put him on the ground for the first time in his career in a professional bout. He put him on the ground, I believe. And then, you know, he came back and he finished him with a body shot. You know, I think a lot of people, when he got knocked down, and it wasn't even a hard punch from Campbell. It was kind of like an over the top, like a hammer fist.
Yeah.
And I remember watching it and I saw that. I was like, oh, wow, like this is it. Like Luke Campbell's going to take it to him. And then, you know, fast forward and Garcia gets him with that body shot and just kind of crumbles Campbell. But, you know, he's a very polarizing figure. I think, like, you know, he's already popular because of social media, but you want to watch him because you think, especially the boxing fans like us who are, you know, a lot more knowledgeable than obviously the casual fan.
That's right, Dan, we are.
That's not a knock. That's not a knock. But
you tell him.
I'll tell him. But you know, especially after the Campbell fight, this is what I think. Like, you know, he obviously has that power because we saw him like knock out all these other guys like Fonseca and all these guys like the Marquis, like he touched on.
Yeah.
You know, and he was knocking all these guys out, and he was like. He gets shared by these mainstream platforms, like ESPN, Bleacher Report. They share his stuff when he gets a knockout because he's popular. But if he can do it against, like he stopped Campbell, that was a good win. I give him a ton of credit for that. Yeah. But if he can go in and fight like a Devin Haney or if he goes as far as a Tank Davis, you know, which I don't think is going to be anytime soon, and for some reason knocks them out, imagine how much bigger he would be especially the hardcore fans, regardless of what you think about him outside the ring, you're definitely going to have to give him credit. I mean, what do you think, Marquis?
Yeah, that's the case with Ryan Garcia. The thing with Ryan Garcia that I have got to figure out, and it's one of those things I'm probably not going to ever figure out about this kid, is that he says so much that you don't know how much of it you can take at face value. Like at one point, you know, he beat Campbell, which I think is a great win, by the way, as you mentioned. And then he mentioned, like, I think, like, doing, like, the media tour after that win, saying he's going to, like, you know, fight on for, like, 3 more or 5 more years and stuff like that. So you just can't picture what's going on, and then everything going on with the mental health stuff going on this year and everything else, where it's like, man, like what's going on with this? Like, does he really want to do this or does he not? And that's one of those. That's gonna be one of those things we're going to find out to the end of time if he wants to or not. But yeah, as you mentioned before, like he's been getting like these highlight reel knockouts on pretty much. Let's be honest, guys. I call it favorable opposition, where it's these undersized guys, these short guys. I mean, these are guys that were set up for him to be knocked out, where it's like the Roberto Dunos and whatnot. And it's like, yeah, that's why I'm going to be disappointed if he doesn't get like a Haney or an actual legitimate title contender fight in his next fight back around. And and as Mike mentioned, he may get a warm up, and I don't want to believe that, but the more I blink on it here, yeah, that's going to happen. And the problem is now is, what kind of warm up is he going to get? Is he going to get Avery Sparrow finally? Does he get to avenge that? I mean, what are we doing with this guy? So I'm hoping Golden Boy puts him up with somebody competitive. I really think that's really one of the bones of contention as well, is that they're trying to find big time names for this guy to fight to help raise the promotional cycle of Golden Boy, because at this point, one way or another, he hasn't hit. At one point, he was supposed to be the face of Golden Boy, and then he kind of wants no part of it. So now they're trying to slowly bring that back to the forefront. But hopefully, if I'm thinking correctly here, if Garcia does get another warm up, how soon does he get turned back around to get an actual opponent like a Haney, or at this point anybody else at 135? Like a Lomachenko or whatever have you. Just to throw a name out there. I don't know he's going to Lomachenko, but just for name for out there, just an actual. Because at the end of the day, guys, for Garcia, in order for his stock to rise to bigger than what it is now, outside of the chicks that like him on Instagram, like in terms of boxing stuff, it's got to be actual opponents, and him getting the usual guys isn't going to cut it.
Right. I mean, kind of going back to the Tanahara-Zepeda fight, I think that fight was at 135. I could see Golden Boy putting him in there with Zepeda, kind of going with what you said, Marquis, like, hey, he needs a comeback fight to kind of get him back in the rhythm because, of everything he went through. And then maybe sometime next year he gets another big name, like a Haney or a Tank, or somebody, a Teofimo, or one of those guys at 135 who are the big players. I could see them doing that. And Zepeda, I think I think if he fights Ryan, just because of his come forward style, I think Zepeda's style is tailor made for Ryan Garcia, because he's going to come forward and Ryan's just going to catch him with that hook and knock him out. Yeah, I think that's tailor made. I mean, what do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, he'll go back. He'll get a tailor-made opponent. Oscar Duarte, he's a Golden Boy fighter. Mexican style, come forward.
Does he fight at 135?
According to BoxRec.
He does? Oh, wow. I thought he was way bigger than that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the next opponent then.
Yeah, probably.
He's a kind of perfect style.
Yeah.
Come forward, fighter. Only got one loss on his record. Both fight for Golden Boy. I could see something like that, because in my opinion, I was surprised when they actually stuck him in there with Luke Campbell. I thought, he's kind of like the cash cow for Golden Boy. I thought they would wrap him up in cotton wool and, like Marquis touched on, keep bringing up these like kind of unbeaten guys from the division below. So Ryan's taller, stronger, quicker, and just keep kind of feeding him those. But I don't know, because of the contracts that he signed with Golden Boy, how long can you keep giving him those sorts of opponents before he's in there with, an opponent and a show and an event that's going to actually bring in some money? Because you can't just keep giving him, these easy opponents and paying him very, very good money. You need to stick him in there with a Gervonta Davis, or, trying to really get him onto pay-per-view, because I'm sure he's probably earning, pay-per-view kind of money with the highest kind of prospect contract ever, Golden Boy said, or, something along those lines.
Yeah. And then he complained again, like 6-7 months later, about that contract too. So it's a bunch of back and forth there with that situation, but we'll see. 135 is definitely, like I mentioned, a lucrative division at the moment. And it's one of the best divisions to look forward to, with all these young guys at 135. Hopefully they all fight each other and as we go forward. Moving on. They also, this past Saturday, the 10th of July, from the Royal Albert Hall in London on BT Sport, Archie Sharp remains undefeated at 20-0 with the 10-round unanimous decision win over Diego Andrade and this was for the vacant WBO Global Super Featherweight title. Mike, what'd you think about Sharp's win?
Good performance from Archie Sharp. Towards the end, he got a nasty cut and managed to, kind of just box on and just kind of close out those last few rounds to pick up the vacant WBO Global outstanding belt there. Onto like bigger and better things. He's obviously highly ranked in the WBA Global, so it should be some big fights in his future coming forward. Some good names in that division as well. So I'm sure Frank will be able to tie up somebody in the super featherweight division for him. Probably later this year. He's got 5 months left to try and get a name over to the UK.
Right. Marquis, do you keep up with British boxing, or are you more focused on American?
No, I try to watch all of it, man, and it's funny because I watched parts of the Archie Sharp. I caught the tail end of it. The one thing about I will admit this in full disclosure, guys, these Queensberry cards, like the past, like during this pandemic specifically, have been borderline club show unwatchable. I'm gonna be honest with you, but because the majority of it, like it's a lot of fights that Frank puts on. No offense to Frank, and he has to do to keep the promotion running. But the stuff that made TV over there is pretty much stuff that wouldn't make TV on a PBC card that has like 15 fights on it. It's a lot of that stuff, and it's like okay. But no, I thought Archie Sharp looked okay. He looked a lot better this time around than he did last time, where he kind of bored us all for 10 rounds. So in the WBO, and the one thing I want to point out to you guys. Archie Sharp's been calling out Jamel Herring for like the last year and a half. Jamel Herring wants no part of this guy, not because he fears Archie Sharp. He just doesn't want to deal with the guy. But at some point, he's going to have to if he keeps moving up the rankings. And if Herring can defeat Stevenson for WBO, and then actually, maybe it will be down the line then, because I'm sure he's going to want Valdez. But in terms of the WBO, he's moved. Archie Sharp's going to be a name that's going to stick in the rankings at 130, and it's going to be one that's going to be up there for a while. The one fight I did catch on that card I want to talk to you guys about was that London Arthur card, that fight, because I'm surprised that was the co-main event, not like the actual main event, because it was listed on everything I had press-wise as the main event, and then that fight's over, and it's like, oh, there's still one more fight here. Like, what?
Right? It's weird.
Like, what? Walkout bout? What are we doing? But yeah, but no, I thought London Arthur looked sharp, actually. I'm hoping with Arthur, because I'm convinced Frank is dead set on making that Yarde Arthur rematch one way or another, whether we want to watch it or not.
There he is. You're back. You froze for a little bit. It's okay. Keep going.
Yeah, pretty much. I think Frank wants to make that Arthur Yarde rematch one way or another, whether we want to watch that fight or not. That fight's all but a done deal. As soon as Yarde can get an actual body in the ring for him that doesn't test positive for COVID or not want to just fight the guy altogether. I think his last opponent just backed out one way or another. It's weird because this COVID blanket, guys. I mean, I'm convinced a lot of people actually do have it, but it's making a lot of these fights not happen a lot more easier not to happen. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yeah, I think we know what you're insinuating. I think everybody kind of knows, if you really know how the business of boxing kind of works. Sometimes they say like, oh, you got an injury, he had a hand injury in training, and it could be true, but you kind of correlate it with, okay, how well is the event selling? How well is this? Is there a TV contract? You kind of have to look at the other. What's
funny about that? You mentioned hand injury. Isn't the hand injury like one of the most overrated injuries in the history of injuries? Because people fight with broken hands all the time, but you get it in training or sparring. Like, oh yeah, fight's off. Like, really?
Yeah, I mean, it happens. It happens. But like you touched on, Marquis, Lyndon Arthur remains undefeated as well at 19-0 with the 9th round TKO over Diaz-Fortuna. Did I say that right, Mike?
From Spain, yeah.
From Spain, right? This was for the WBO Intercontinental Light Heavyweight title. Mike, what did you think about Arthur's win?
The opposite to Marquis, I didn't thought he looked too great. I just expected a little bit more after he beat Yard. I don't know whether he just came in and obviously thought this guy was obviously the best in the country that he came from, and obviously not highly ranked or whatever, really. I don't know if he just took him lightly, because I thought he should have got him out there maybe a little bit earlier. But maybe I was just, my expectation of Lyndon Arthur is maybe a little bit higher than it should be after his dominant performance over Yard. But like Marquis touched on, I'd be kind of pissed if I was Lyndon Arthur, because if you beat somebody, unless like you really want to rematch him, you should be moving on to bigger and better things. And, he should be looking at world titles. So if I was him, I'd be turning to Frank Warren saying, well, why do I have to match Yard again? Surely he's got to come back and rebuild. Like you're pretty much telling him like, hey, you're going to fight Yard until he beats you because I like him more than you and he's more marketable. Like, that's pretty much what you're telling him. Same as like Teofimo Lopez, if like trying to make him fight Lomachenko, I'd be like, hell no. I'm moving on to bigger and better things. He's behind me now. And if I was Lyndon Arthur, I'd be kind of annoyed that that's all that keeps coming up. You know, Yard was supposed to headline this event. His opponent fell out and they couldn't find somebody. But all they keep doing is bringing up an opponent he's already beaten. So,
I mean, Mike, you act like you're surprised. You know that happens all the time. Like if there's a fighter who loses, like an Anthony Yard who lost against Lyndon Arthur, and the promotional machine is behind them and was behind them at that time and knows the marketability of the fighter and all that, sees how well they sell and how well the metrics do in social media and TV ratings and what have you. You act like this is the first time this happened in the sport of boxing. You know that happens, you know? I mean, like for Teofimo, you touched on Teofimo Lopez fighting most likely Lomachenko by the end of the year. Top Rank has already said. I mean, like Marquis, and you tell me on what your opinion is on this as well. Like since they restructured, Top Rank has restructured or struck a new deal with Teofimo Lopez. Obviously, he's getting paid more money. We're assuming in his new contract. Do you think that if there was no restructuring of that contract for Teofimo Lopez between him and Top Rank, where they obviously increased his purse for every fight, do you think he'd be fighting? Do you think Top Rank would put him in a rematch against Lomachenko, which is likely going to be on ESPN Plus pay-per-view, because, you know, it sells that's going to be able to pay both of the purses for each fighter? Do you think if the contract wasn't restructured, Marquis, do you think that rematch would still happen?
No, I think honestly, if Triller had their stuff together at this point, I don't think this rematch happens. I personally, guys, I think if this Teofimo Lopez Kambosos fight had already happened and the Triller check already cleared for Lopez, I really don't think we would hear anything from him in Top Rank at all. But since it hasn't, and he's got to get these fights in one way or another, and that's just what's going to happen with that. My thing with Teofimo Lopez, I think more than anything else, is I think Teofimo Lopez has one fight left at 135, and that fight is either this IBF mandatory, whatever, against Kambosos, or if that fight gets scrapped altogether and it's Lomachenko on pay-per-view. That's it. Then he's moving up. So if someone's going to be the odd person out for that fight. Granted, if it's Kambosos, like he gets to fight for a vacant, IBF belt. I mean, yippee. But in terms of Lomachenko, I know because they've been building like the entire thing around revenge for Lomachenko after the Nakatani knockout. So they're putting the pieces together back for it, and it's going behind. This is pay-per-view written for it all day. I just don't know, however, guys, if that fight result-wise is going to be anything different than what we saw in the first fight. We'll get a more active Lomachenko the first 6 rounds, but I think this is the same result.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I still think you can't count out Lomachenko. Especially now that he's the challenger coming into this fight. Yeah. So I think people shouldn't be surprised if he wins. And then I think Top Rank would kind of hope he wins too, because then they can do a trilogy. It's more money for them in the long run. But, I think Teofimo probably would be the favorite going in, but you think Lomachenko would be the favorite? Mike?
The betting favorite? Or do you mean just the fans?
A betting favorite.
I would say maybe Loma, or maybe even just both of them at like minus 150, like an even, but I don't know, because I just think, I know obviously Teofimo was new. I just think the experience, 396-1 in the amateurs, all the stuff that he did beforehand, going in with a supposed injury. I mean, he had an operation afterwards, but all the fighters go in with injuries all the time. I think Lomachenko starts as favorite.
But yeah, possibly. I think it's going to be one of those bouts like we've seen before in the past, how it fluctuates, especially as it gets closer. It fluctuates a lot more. If there's more people putting money on Lomachenko or Lopez as it gets closer, the odds are going to switch.
What it opens at, though, would be interesting, because obviously wherever the money goes, it goes up and down, obviously.
Right.
They need to protect themselves. But just to see what it starts at using their experts, it would be interesting to see where it goes now that you guys have brought it up.
Yeah, because beforehand, I think it was like at what was all said and done, Lopez was a 3-1 underdog. Yeah, they're not going. The casinos can't afford to lose that money again. So it's probably going to be something like you mentioned before, like a negative like 115, negative 125, whatever have you going into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I could definitely see that as well.
Yeah.
Also on the card, Zach Parker remains undefeated as well at 21-0 with the first round KO over Shirzad Kusanov. who take, I hope I pronounced that right, who takes the third loss of his career.
Sure.
This is for the WBO International Super Middleweight title. Man, the WBO is just on all of these Queensberry, Frank Warren's cards, just like Top Rank. Mike, what do you think about Parker's win?
Good performance, Kuzanov, if I believe rightly, had never been beaten like that, just kind of like destroyed early in the first round. Good run out for Zach Parker, really facing somebody, with an okay looking record, just to kind of tick over, because he's going to be waiting his sweet time to face Canelo. Canelo's not going to be picking him to as a voluntary to defend, because who is Zach Parker? Unless you're a boxing nerd like us, most people aren't going to know who he is. He's going to be facing the Caleb Plants and move up to 175. And, I know that, Zach Parker has been the WBO like number one or around there for, a really, really, really long time. Was always picked to fight Billy Joe Saunders, but similar thing, Billy Joe was just taking the path of least resistance, like Marquis said earlier, for the most money. And, Canelo kind of does the opposite, right? It takes the hardest path for the most money. So, yeah, it's kind of upsetting for him, but he's got to keep fighting and wait for, probably Canelo to drop a title and then he can pick it up.
Possibly, yeah. And then rounding off this card, Dennis McCann, bunch of undefeated fighters here, man. Ted remains at 10-0, gets a 10th win of his career, actually, with the second round TKO over John Chua, who suffers a fourth loss of his career. And then I don't know if it was you, Marquis, or Mike, you mentioned, I didn't know Anthony Yard was supposed to headline this event. There wasn't an injury or anything, right? His opponent fell out. They couldn't land an opponent for him.
His opponent backed out.
Yeah, it was injury, right?
Yeah, I think it's good. His opponent claimed, I think he caught COVID, so they couldn't find anybody on I think it was like a week and a half notice. Oof. But to think your point, Mike, about Zach Parker, I think Zach Parker Frank has done it again, by the way, with this WBO stuff, because the last time the WBO belt at 168 was left vacant, it was for Billy Joe Saunders against Sharif Sufi, and we all know how that turned out.
Right.
I think once it's all said and done, because I don't think Canelo's going to hang around for Zach Parker after that. If Canelo has like a 5-year reign at 168, maybe he gets a shot, but I don't see that happening at this point. So I think that belt's going to be dropped again at some point. And I think for Parker, that's kind of cool on his part, because I think he has a chance to really pick it back up. I've actually liked what I've been seeing from Zach Parker in these past few fights, ever since he signed with Queensberry from some of these old Matchroom shows. Like, the kid's got some pop. It's just he's just been buying time. And unfortunately at 168, there's only one person that has all the belts for the most part, not named Caleb Plant, that's Canelo. So you're just stuck.
Yeah. I'm surprised, because if you look at him, he's really the whole package. He looks good. He's a good-looking dude. He talks pretty well. And I think he's a really good talent as well, because if you look, he goes through the body really well. He doesn't just always headhunt. He's got good, slick movement around the ring. He just hasn't never really got on to that next level. I don't know why Frank doesn't kind of push him more.
Right, yeah. I mean, maybe in his, who would hypothetically, both of you, who would you think that Zach Parker should face in his next bout? If he's, like Mike mentioned, he's been rated highly about number one in the WBO rankings for a long time now. I would think that he needs a significant name in that weight class. Who would you guys think he should fight next to really kind of get to that next level?
At this point, if I had to throw a spitball, I'm just going to throw a name that's out there just for kicks and giggles. Someone who had a belt before, someone like a Callum Smith, someone to see where he's at. I don't think that fight's realistic, however, but something along those lines, because he's proven he can beat pretty much whatever on the WBO mandatory list at this point. And I know Frank is known for having guys have stay busy opponents. Joe Joyce is facing Carlos Takem at the end of the month, so these guys are staying busy to stay busy at this point. So at this point, he needs an actual title challenger, or at least a former title holder, and a name like Callum Smith would be perfect. Personally, I just don't see it happening, because that involves Frank and Eddie getting together and working something out.
Mike,
I agree. You're not gonna, if you're next in line for a Canelo fight, which isn't going to happen, you're not going to really risk that spot for a very hard opponent that doesn't hold the title. So a name like David Lemieux, coming down the other side of the hill, but still has that name recognition. Avni Yildirim, been in with Canelo, got knocked out by Chris Eubanks, so you'd probably beat him. Or if you want to pick up a little trinket, go for an IBO. Probably a hard fight, though. Carlos Gongoria.
Oh, yeah.
That's a hard fight.
That's a hard fight.
It is. I know I just said at the beginning you shouldn't pick a hard fight, but at least you get a chance. You get a chance at an IBO, because until Canelo decides to give up that WBO,
you're just sitting.
You're not going to get the fight because you don't have the name recognition. And you're going to have to just wait till he decides to drop it, because I very much doubt the WBO is going to enforce anything on him when they're getting a good chunk of change every fight.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think Parker, what Frank Warren and Parker should be doing is that, if Frank Warren has the confidence in his talent that he feels that he has, he should try to put him in there with these big significant names, these highly rated contenders, or maybe if he could get him a world title shot, to really show what he can do. Because the only way he's gonna, like I think Marquis mentioned, both of you mentioned, he's not gonna get Canelo anytime soon. If Canelo stays champion at 168 for the next 5 years, that's probably his best bet. But is he gonna wait around 5 years? But I think his best bet is to try to fight all these highly ranked guys, all these killers, quote unquote. And if he beats them, that's how he gets Canelo's attention. He gets more publicity out of that. And then Canelo's going to notice him and be like, hey, who's this guy? He just beat all these guys, like a Caleb Plant or a Callum Smith. He's beating all these guys, and then Canelo's going to notice him like, I can beat him. I want to fight him. I mean, that's the only way I think he could really kind of get somebody like Canelo's attention.
Or do a Shannon Briggs. Follow him round, start like eating his food in restaurants.
Yeah,
just like go past him when he's in the car on a scooter and chuck eggs at his car.
In the boat on the.
You'd probably get shot in Mexico though. They do that to Canelo. You probably won't come out.
Probably, but I mean, yeah, who knows? But I think Canelo's definitely a fantasy right now for somebody like Zach Parker, and the only way you're going to get his attention is if you fight these other big talents and you beat them. And you start padding your resume with these killers that you're going in and they're good fights, and then you beat them and you get Canelo's attention. I think
Caleb Truax.
Yeah, Caleb Truax, I think, is another one. I think that's a good name for him. I don't know. What do you think about a strategy like that, Marquis?
Well, he's going to have to do something along those lines where he has to fight, as you mentioned before, the quote-unquote killers. The problem, as you mentioned before, because you just mentioned Caleb Truax, not too many assassins at 168, guys, as we all know here. So it's kind of the best of the rest. Maybe you can try. You can throw in, Anthony Durrell out there. I might as well. I mean, stuff like that. You're kind of he's kind of in one of those spots where he needs names like that. Maybe if a JCC Junior, something along those lines, like a name, like either a big named opponent he can get by with, or at least a name that we can at least see where he's at. But no, it's going to be a while.
Right. Moving on to fight preview this upcoming Saturday, the 17th of July, from the AT&T Center in San Antonio, Texas, on Showtime for the unified WBC, WBO, actually it's for the undisputed WBC, WBA, IBF, and WBO super welterweight world titles. Jermell Charlo, 34-1, goes up against Brian Carlos Castano. I hope this delivers on the hype that it has behind it in terms of like hardcore boxing fans and how we're looking at it. But for some reason, and I'll start with you, Marquis, you tell me if my feelings here are misplaced or not. I think I like Castano. I think he's going to put up a decent fight, but I just think Charlo is just the better guy this Saturday. What do you think?
What's funny? Like, for as big as this fight's supposed to be at 154 for undisputed and the Ring magazine title and all just blase. I just don't think it's that interesting. I'm with you. I think Charlo just runs into this guy and just blitzes Castano. I think Castano runs into a left by Charlo like in the 6th or 7th round and just ends this. I don't think this fight is as competitive as people make it out to be. And realistically, guys, I think this fight's only happening is because Castano has the WBO title, and it's a quality game of keep away. Because I'm convinced personally that we would have gotten Charlo like Harrison 3 or something along those lines at PBC on the PBC side of the fence at 154, because they have every single guy over there. I mean, why is he facing Castano except the fact that he has this WBO belt that he beat Patrick Teixeira for over and over again. So I mean, that's kind of what we're with this belt. But I'll give Castano credit. He has the ability to. If Castano can keep Charlo at some form of range, like he did, like the Castano-Lara fight, if he can keep it to something along those level, where it keeps Castano, from getting wailed on, I think he has a shot. But I just don't see that happening at all. I really don't. I'm kind of with you on this.
What do you think, Mike?
Well, I was going to change my mind now. After listening to you two, I mean, I personally, from what we've seen so far, I thought it was going to be, a good fight. Castano only having 17 fights, but he's got a lot of amateur experience, and even in the pro ranks, he's been in there with, like Lara, Michel Soro.
Yeah.
So
Teixeira.
Teixeira, yeah. All different types of styles.
Yeah.
See, I can't decide now. I don't know.
So you think it's an even fight?
I don't think Charlo's going to have all of his own way and just destroy him. Castano is, he's got amateur victories over Errol Spence, Sergey Derevyanchenko, so he can box.
Yeah.
He can box when he wants to. So,
I mean, I hope that it is a great fight.
I might go Castano to win.
Really?
Okay.
If he boxes, I think it all depends on what he decides to do. If he decides to kind of mimic Charlo and just kind of stand and bang, I think he loses. But if he sticks to a game plan and goes for a more of an amateur style, a more skillful, slick style,
like how Harrison did it.
I was going to touch on, obviously not exactly the same as Harrison, because Harrison's a different type of fighter, but that we know that that's what troubles Charlo. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, in the second fight, I thought Harrison was doing well until he got too overconfident. He got too clever. He got too cocky, and then Charlo caught him, and then that's where it all went downhill from there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm hoping, like, Marquis touched on at the beginning of the show. There's like, we all have a type of cynicism in boxing, covering the sport here from the angle that we do here. But I'm hoping that it lives up to the hype. I'm hoping that it's a competitive, awesome fight. But I don't know. I just think that Charlo is just gonna be too much. I feel like I'm having the same feelings that I had when Charlo fought Erickson Lubin a couple years ago. Even though Erickson Lubin was too young at the time, I feel like they kind of rushed him. But there was some hype behind that fight. Lubin was undefeated. Charlo was obviously was undefeated at the time too as well, because they fought here at USC at the Galen Center, and then Charlo knocked him out with that nasty kind of buckled his knees, and within the first couple rounds. That's the kind of similar eerie feeling that I'm getting for this fight. I mean, what do you think, Marquis? Am I wrong?
No, that's what I think. Where I think Castano is going to just catch something from Charlo. He's going to run into something. I think this fight, guys, plays out a lot more like the last Charlo fight had against Rosario. The only difference is, there's two differences. One, I don't think he's going to mimic what Rosario was doing, because obviously that didn't work out at all on all fronts. But the one thing that I saw with Charlo just in that Rosario fight was just that he kept attacking the body on him more than anything else. And I think we're going to catch more of that with Charlo again with this Castano fight as well, to slow him all down. And that's why I really think at some point, if he starts at the body and then goes upstairs, that's why I think this fight ends early. But I could be off on that. And for some reason, and to piggyback your point, Mike, if Castano makes this guy box a little bit, he could lose this. We've seen him lose before boxing. You know what's funny, guys? In terms of boxing arguments and in terms of scorecards and decisions, I mean, you can put Hagler, Leonard up there. You can put Canelo, Triple G1 up there. Charlo Harrison 1 is easily one of the more underrated debated fights ever. And I think Harrison won fair and square. Just don't tell anyone who fought Charlo won that. That's all.
Right. No, you're right. Yeah. So Marquis, final point on this fight, on this undisputed fight between Charlo and Castano. Who wins and how?
I think Charlo wins. I think he wins as just knockout either mid rounds, like 6, 7, or 8 round. Like I don't think this one goes the distance. The one thing I'm looking forward to about this with Charlo winning, if he wins this fight, where will he finally be on everybody's pound for pound rankings? Because I've been doing all these media calls for this fight leading up to it, and that's all he cares about at this point. He called the belts trophies, guys. I mean, he's WBL trophy. Doesn't care about this. He wants to be on this Ring Magazine rating panel. He wants to be there. I mean, that's what this is all about for him, because he's mentioning that. He mentioned this Hall of Fame stuff. I mean, that's another time. But that's where his mind's at with this. So that's why I think he gets this done one way or the other.
Mike, who wins and how?
I think if Castano decides to box from the outside, I think he could take it on points. He could frustrate Charlo and Obviously, I don't know Charlo, but looking at him from the outside, I think if it starts to go against him, I think he could unravel. He's kind of seems to be a bit of an emotional guy, and I think he would start to chase it. And if Castano can stand on the outside and just box him, I think he has a very good chance of taking it. But Derek James seems to be that gym seems to be on fire at the minute. Mm-hmm. So I still think Charlo is the favorite going in, but I could see Castano taking it if he boxes.
Yeah, it's definitely an intriguing fight, and I hope, like I keep reiterating, that it lives up to the expectation that us as hardcore boxing fans are expecting. So I hope, because when we see good ass fights like that, it's the best thing in the world. So we'll see. Yeah. Also on that card, Rolly Romero, 13-0, goes up against Anthony Yiggett for the WBA interim lightweight title. What do you think about this matchup, Marquis?
I think it's just telling me for Rolly to knock this guy out in like 4 rounds or less. I'm just trying to figure out how many more of these interim, regular, gold, super platinum, unofficial BOGO WBA belts they have at this point, guys. But whatever the case, with all semantics about that aside, I really think that this is a fight that's tailor-made for Romero to pretty much make a highlight knockout, to be honest with you.
What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I agree. Rolly shouldn't really have the title. That decision against Martinez was atrocious, and they kind of just swept it under the carpet and off they went.
That fight didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, it should have been a rematch for everybody who watched it, but obviously PBC were like, well, we wanted Rolly to have it because of his social media following, so we're just gonna not talk about it, sweep it under the carpet, and we'll just swiftly move on. So, like you say, how many more are they going to give him? Rolly's another kind of like Ryan Garcia, Deontay Wilder-esque. They're really, really just heavy, very, very heavy-handed. I think the first person who can box and take a bit of a punch, will really trouble Rolly.
Yeah, we'll see. Rounding off that card, Amilcar Vidal, 12-0. I hope I said that right. These names get harder and harder. It never ends. Versus Emmanuel Alim, 18-2-2. What do you think about this matchup, Mike?
I don't know too much about Amilcar Vidal. He says he now boxes out of Coachella. So is he with Caballero? Is that who he's training with?
I would assume. I mean, that they're the only ones out there, right?
I mean, you've got obviously
pretty much. Is that Fundora's camp out that way?
Yeah, I mean, you've got Fundora's camp is out there. Obviously, Caballero, who trains Chocolatito, and I suppose Joe Diaz is Coachella Valley, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm not too sure which one he's with, but it says he's now fighting out of Coachella Valley. Should be a good fight. There's kind of a 3-pronged attack on this showcase. This Showtime, fight card on Saturday. I think Amilcar will take it. He seems to be a heavy-handed fighter. 12 fights, 11 KOs. So should be a good fight.
What do you think, Marquis?
Yeah, that's pretty much going to be the case for this. I haven't seen Alim in a while, actually, so I'm intrigued to see how rusty he looks at coming out of all this. But but Vidal's a heavy puncher. I think he was on a couple of Showbox cards a while back. It's been a while for him, too, actually. So it's one of those prospect fights that's like, to showcase, up-and-coming Showtime fighters. They do this a lot. They've been doing this a lot lately, more to recent cards, actually, with the exception of Colbert in the main event. But they had Rivera, opening up the show, where they put, like their up-and-coming prospect on the front of it and then having against either a gatekeeper or one of those types. But this is one of those fights, and I really am intrigued to see how Vidal moves on in terms of that. But no, I really think that's another one of those fights for Vidal where we see how he's progressed for the most part.
Right. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, obviously everybody's looking forward to the Charlo Castano fight because that's what's selling this Showtime event. But hopefully there's some good moments in the undercard of this broadcast. Moving on to the news and notes section of the Last Round podcast as we round off the episode here. Marquis, PBC purportedly wants Canelo to sign a multi-fight deal in order to make the Caleb Plant unification fight. What's your take on that whole situation?
You know what's funny about that? I thought that was the problem why Canelo didn't sign last year when this was coming around to fight Plant last year, because he didn't want to do a multi-fight deal. He just went with Eddie Hearn. which at the end of the day doesn't make any sense because that fight, that whole deal with Matchroom became a multi-fight deal. So I don't know what Canelo's agenda is in terms of the fight deal. I just think he just wants to fight Caleb Plant one way or another and just be done with it so he can be undisputed, and then he can just do what he wants with these belts after it. It stinks that they're trying to hamstring him with more than one fight, but my thing with that is at 168 for Canelo, even with PBC, like as I mentioned before, guys, 168 isn't exactly like murderer's row here. Like after Canelo supposedly beats Plant, I mean, what's next for him? They're not going to David Morrell. I mean, he's not ready for that. I mean, what like Anthony Durrell? I mean, so we mentioned Caleb Truax. I mean, what's left for him at 168 after these guys? So John Ryder. I mean, there's got to be something for Canelo. There's got to be something else better on the table for Canelo to actually just sign his life away for two or more than one fight at this point with PBC.
What do you think, Mike?
I mean, if it falls through due to that, then, if I was Caleb Plant, I'd be pretty pissed. I understand, why PBC want it. They want, 2 bites at the cherry, which is understandable. But if Canelo is the biggest draw, he's the money man, he kind of makes the decisions, then if he wants to stay with Matchroom and just go to PBC for, one, joint promotion, then do it. At the end of the day, you're kind of screwing over your own fighter because that's going to be by far his biggest payday. So if I was Caleb Plant and this all falls, flat on its face, then, I'd be pretty pissed with my employer. But, moving on from that, I think Eddie Hearn said that he wants to fight Caleb Plant and then move up to 175 and fight Beterbiev, right? That seems to be what the rumor is, according to Eddie Hearn. So,
yeah, the only way I could see anything like that happening is if Canelo pretty much says, "Hey, look, like I'll do like a 2-fight deal with you guys, but in those or in the second fight or 3-fight deal or whatever, you have to produce these names that you have. If you don't produce these names that you have, I'm not going to fight on those. I'm not going to take those fight deals. That's the only way I can do it because then he still keeps the power because he's like, well, I know I can fight this guy. I've been wanting to fight this guy, maybe like a Charlo or something.
Benavidez.
Benavidez, and honestly, like if I was PBC, if that's what Canelo said, I'd be like, okay, we'll take that. I mean, like at the end of the day, who's the one with the leverage right now? Is it PBC and Plant or is it Canelo? Who has the leverage right now? Is PBC and Al Heyman and Caleb Plant willing to let Canelo walk? Because he doesn't want to sign a multi-fight deal and let him go somewhere else and fight somebody else, and they don't get Plant that payday, and then they don't get him, on Showtime or Fox or whatever.
Canelo has the power, in my opinion.
Yeah, he does, because if Caleb, let's say, for example, if Canelo walks from this fight, he can still fight Triple G and pretty much anyone else in the rest of boxing wants to call him out for a fight. Yeah. If Caleb Plant walks from this fight, he's looking at the rest of his IBF mandatory challengers and the Vincent Feigenboots of the world. So yeah, it's levels.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see. We'll see how. I think Eddie Hearn had said in an interview this week or maybe today that Canelo should be deciding on his opponent in the next week or so. Because usually we're about 2 months out from his September date. Usually they announce it in the next couple weeks or so. So we'll see. I'm assuming we'll get a finalization of an opponent in the next 2 weeks. Also, news and notes: the WBA has declined to reinstate Manny Pacquiao as their super champion, and decided to keep Yordenis Ugas as their champion as well. What do you think about the WBA's decision with Manny Pacquiao, Marquis?
It's funny that the WBA, the one time the WBA doesn't want to give a person another belt, they decide to do it against Manny Pacquiao. They're giving everybody else interim belts and everything else. I'll use for semantics, but Manny wants the belt that he had that he hasn't defended yet. And he's like, nah, we're keeping it on Ugas, which I really think, guys, at the end of the day, I think that's more of just if in terms of WBA's coming from their side of it, I see why they didn't give it back to Manny, because their thinking is that this is Manny's last fight, and if Manny wins, he's dropping this belt and he's retiring regardless. If he loses, it's in Errol Spence's hands, and that's one less sanctioning fee we can put on somebody else to take their money from. That's why it stays with Ugas. So that way he can face whoever, and then they can get money coming in. And then down the line, if they want to, unify that Ugas fight with the winner of that Spence Pacquiao fight, they can throw that back out there. But no, it's kind of funny. I know Pacquiao's team has been about it, but at the end of the day, it's the WBA title, guys. It's just not. I mean, Manny's held this belt before already. He got off the Keith Thurman, for Christ's sakes. I mean, let's not act like this isn't the prestige belt out of all these belts. I'm pretty sure Manny walked into the freaking press conference this Sunday with a copy of the belt already. He has a copy of this belt. Does he really need the designation at this point? So who cares?
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I think he thought it was worth a shot to like, hey, let's see if we could get it. Let's request it. And, I don't think he really cares. Like, oh, I'm not, I don't care if I didn't get it. That was just worth a shot, to add a little bit more marketability to the event. But yeah, he knows. He's like, I'm still going to get paid anyways. I'm still one of the biggest stars in the sport. So it is what it is. And also what was announced this week, Virgil Ortiz is going up in his next fight against Mean Machine Kavalauskas. It's announced for August 14th in Frisco, Texas on DAZN. What do you think about this matchup, Marquis?
What's funny about this matchup, guys? This fight was all but predetermined the minute he stopped Maurice Hooker, right? And we were like, oh, all right, cool. What's next for him? Well, how about Mean Machine? Nice of someone listening to fans for once on a fight that actually gets done with a prospect. So it's also a tough fight for him too. I'm actually looking forward to this because it's an actual welterweight. This isn't Maurice Hooker who had to move up in weight and couldn't keep Ortiz off of him. I'm really seeing how he's going to be able to keep up with him, because if Ortiz beats Mean Machine, which I think we're all expecting here at this point, what's next for him? They can't dodge this kid forever now. I know he's like the WBO like intercontinent, one of these regional like belt holders at this point, but at the end of the day, the WBO can pretty much shift positions, and he's like the mandatory challenger at some point for Terrence Crawford. Will he face Terrence Crawford? Who knows? I doubt it likely, because I think at that point, if I was Crawford, I probably would either I would move up or just keep it moving one way or the other. I have a weird thing with Crawford on stuff like that, but no, it's a fun fight nonetheless with Ortiz and Kavalauskas. I'm actually looking forward to that one. What should be a good one.
Mike, what do you think about that matchup?
Yeah, great matchmaking. Kind of Marquis summed it up really well. I think we all kind of assumed or put forward. The fans kind of chose the opponent. Yeah, I expect Virgil Ortiz to win. He really is just one of the best up-and-coming prospects out there at the time. I think we've been saying it on this show for, several years. Just, unfortunately, he's on the wrong side of the street. All the titles in those division are over with Top Rank and PBC. He's kind of in the same boat as Terrence Crawford. So maybe they should get in and swim together, maybe, since neither of them can really get any opponents. And like Marquis said, the kid's dangerous. No one's going to want to fight him.
No one wants this kid.
And unfortunately, he doesn't have the Canelo, McGregor type fan base where you can say, hey, we're pretty much going to buy the title off you for $6 or $7 million. And you're like, okay, that's a pretty good payday. You can have the belt. So yeah, I think he's going to have to try and make himself a mandatory and go from there. Obviously, like you touched on, he's a WBO, so it looks like he's trying to go for Crawford. Maybe after this, like a washed-up Keith Thurman fancies one more payday, someone like that. Danny Garcia's already moved up, or else he'd have been a good choice as well.
Yeah.
We'll see. But I like the matchup. I really like the matchup. Obviously, Mean Machine lost to Crawford, but he did knock him down, even though it wasn't officially counted during the fight. Crawford did hit the ground. And he did give him some issues. He did give him some problems during that fight. So, Crawford, in a lot of people's eyes, is obviously arguably one of the best fighters in the world, top 5.
I think Jesus Soto Caras came back, right? Didn't he fight Eric Morales recently?
Oh, yeah. Well, of course. Yeah, all these novelty fights are coming out of the woodwork,
Boy.
I'm sure he's still signed to Golden Boy.
You never know. It could happen. You never know.
Nico Macias, how much is he weighing now?
I think he retired. Yeah.
The Rooster?
The Rooster, yeah.
The Rooster.
But as we cross the finish line here on the last round, this week's episode of The Last Round, Marquis, before we let you go, we wanted to ask you, have we just talked about before we started recording, about your back and forth with Boxing Writers Association of America. I believe you tweeted recently that you had applied for membership a while ago, and then they recently sent you a rejection letter. Kind of walk us through that whole process, because I know you got a lot of people like responding to you on Twitter and kind of giving you some support, and they're blocking people. I mean, what happened with the whole situation?
Yeah, I was going to ask you guys can get blocked by chance, because anyone who's seen that post, I think at this point has been blocked or muted or been banned from the BWAA's Twitter page, which, for the record, if you are blocked, you're not missing anything. They just announced, press releases of people getting hired at other organizations. But so you're not missing too much there. But no, the story with all of that is, and it's kind of funny looking back on it. I'll say this affectionately. The guy who runs that account made this a bigger deal than what it was. And what happened is that I applied I kind of write for Big Fight Week. I've been doing it for a couple of years now. I do like everybody else does. Apply for the Writers Association, because what I totally forgot about this is that those guys have a say in the Hall of Fame vote. And that was my thinking. I was like, all right, I'm covering boxing long enough. I want a piece of this Hall of Fame action. So I applied literally the week after Manny Pacquiao beat Keith Thurman back in 2019, and didn't hear anything back. So I sent a follow-up email in September of last year. Didn't hear anything back. I had to get the information pretty much third hand, and they forwarded. Apparently, the story that I've gotten was it was a miscommunication. I mean, it's a 2-year miscommunication, guys. It is what it is with that. I'm read between if you'd like, if you wish. But essentially, they gave me the deal with denial letter saying I didn't get in. But they gave me one of those denial letters that you get, like, where you don't, get a job at, like, on Indeed, where it's like, hey, we didn't see your resume, we're just going to move on here. Like, kind of want to, and my response back honestly was simply like, hey, why did it take so long for me to get this non-answer back on this denial? And that was my answer. That was the question I asked point blank, and it got me blocked, and all my friends blocked, and half of boxing Twitter blocked shortly afterwards. Beto Duran included, mind you. That's what kind of kicked off all of that, by the way, too, because I think he got blocked first. My compadre, Tony Bruno, got blocked as well because he retweeted my tweet. And then from there, it just snowballed. And that's kind of where it stood with that. But the follow-up I have on this, and it's a happy end to this horrific story, because they kind of handled this about as poorly as possible. Because I guess on their mind, they figuring, hey, this guy's being a nuisance. I'll just block him and then he'll go away. Apparently they don't know about me on boxing Twitter, and they didn't get the memo. Sorry about that, but that's kind of what happened with all of that. And it was great that I got the support for it. But be honest with you guys, because you never know until you try. I mean, shoot or shoot, and I just felt I'll just shoot my shot and see what happens. I got no big deal, whatever. But that's kind of what happened with all that. But the happy ending to the story was they announced Jake Donovan as VP of this Boxing Writers Association, and as a stipulation, because I can tell you guys this in solid confidence, as a stipulation of him getting that nomination to be vice president was to rectify certain situations with that social media account. And I'm pretty sure, in indirect words, I'm pretty sure that's referring to yours truly. So it may be happy into all of this. Or if anything else, everybody else on that Boxing Writers Association can be unblocked. I'm probably still blocked forever, guys, but it's okay.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting when that whole situation started catching steam. And because we had seen other personalities back in, as time went on, that they were blocked by the Twitter account. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I wonder what happened. And then more and more people started posting, hey, I'm blocked too. Hey, I'm blocked too. And I was like, what the heck is going on around here? And then your situation, you started publicizing, tweeting about your situation. And then you got people, you got people like Beto Duran, who's obviously a professional in the sport of boxing. He's a commentator. Yeah. He's been a part of a lot of big events. He's on CBS and KCAL 9 here in Southern California. Yeah. He does a sports show. And he's blocked. And, so I was wondering, Mike and I were talking about it. We were texting about it, like, what the hell's going on with that? Like it kind of, in the long term, it's going to affect the credibility of an organization like that, which is really bad, especially that's something that has to do with the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to, guys, is where it's essentially this Writers Association. It's old guard boxing media. I get it. It is what it is, and it's the old rule of thumb. And I've learned this years and years ago, just in life in general, where it's like one person can't stop. One person can't knock a big dog off a porch, But you bring a bunch of little dogs to that front yard, there's gonna be some problems. So you know that's kind of what it was. That's pretty much all that's happening in front of you guys, and they're resting on their laurels and all this other stuff. And it's like this block, you know, just like this whole weird this weird fascination, which I find to be kind of funny. Imagine a boxing Twitter account blocking people that cover boxing and follow it. That's what's happening. So that's why Jake is going to have to go in and clean up a lot of mess. I wish him the best on that, because personally, I probably would have abandoned ship. But
right, yeah,
it's a PR disaster, guys. It's like and that's kind of what it is. But I thought it was really funny, just more that they just blocked everyone that was associated with it. It's like, you just can't. That's just not going to work out that way. It's like it'd be different if I had, like, you know, a small Twitter following, or like, you know, it was like, you know, just random boxing troll on the internet. I get all that, you know. If I like, you know, 30 followers, yeah, block it and beat it, you know. Then 2 of my friends show up. Well, we'll fight this off. I'm currently at like 3,000 despite my efforts, guys. I'm sorry. I don't know. It's not going to work out.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely an intriguing situation, and you know, we'll see how it unfolds. Maybe they'll keep blocking, or maybe they unblock people with all the PR they're getting, whether it's good or bad. You know, we'll see.
If you block all of boxing Twitter, then what are you tweeting for?
yeah, exactly. We'll see as time moves on how it all keeps unfolding. But you know, we appreciate your time tonight, Marquis. You know, being here, your first time here on the last round, we definitely appreciate it. I'm sure this is the first of many going forward as a guest appearance here on the last round. Before we let you go ahead and plug your social media, where people can find your work all over the internet. Go ahead, man. The floor is yours.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks so much for having me on, man. No, this has been fun. No, you guys can find everything that I do writing-wise on Twitter at Weak Sauce Radio. I'm pretty much all day tweeting nonsense, boxing stuff. If I have any news of any note, anything interesting, pretty much if I'm watching TV, I'm tweeting for the most part, because television is not that interesting, especially if it's a baseball game on. So that's usually a lot of things going on. BigFightWeekend.com is my website for all boxing news that I write about, past, present, current, and future. You just keep up with a lot of the stuff for the most part. It's like, I call it my running diary of boxing news. It keeps me informed because I'm reading up on it and I'm writing about it. It makes. Can I be honest with you guys? This website writing about it has made me a smarter boxing person, and I didn't think that was possible because it's my handwriting on these stories, and I know how I write. So, but it's hilarious. So that you can find me there. Also, pretty much anything I do. Also as well, the Twitter Big Fight Weekend is also the number one you guys mentioned as well. That's a cool follow as well, where anything I tweet story-wise will be on that as well. It's a fun site. So, but that's where you can find me. You mentioned at the intro, the Making of Champions, Joe Louis Bourbon. We're kicking that back up in September this fall with a second slate of podcast shows. Also, you can catch that also on the Joe Louis Bourbon Facebook. It's also on YouTube at Joe Louis Bourbon. And we're doing a complete relaunch of all of that too as well.
Sweet. And before we completely sign off here, Mike, go ahead and let our listeners know where they can find us and follow us.
We're at The Last Round 12 on Twitter and Instagram, and be sure to join us next week. We'll be previewing Tyson Fury and no, we won't. It'll be Joe Joyce and Carlos Takam. Unfortunately, obviously, it was supposed to be the big one. It was supposed to be the heavyweight trilogy. You know, Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, but COVID.
Yeah, unfortunately, that we could have dedicated a whole episode to just that whole situation, but we thought about it.
Man, you gotta admit though, guys, what a downgrade of heavyweight championship fights. You go from this Tyson Fury to Deontay Wilder fight to Joe Joyce defending his regional WBO heavyweight championship against Carlos Takam. It's like, oh man, it'll be interesting though.
It's boxing. You know, that's the only way to put it. It's boxing. It's the sport of boxing. But once again, Marquis, we appreciate you jumping on here on the last round. And also for our listeners, don't forget that we have some merchandise available with Fit Warrior brand. We have some shirts and some sweaters. So if you can, go ahead and check those out. If you like them, please support us. We are independent. We're not backed by any big entity here in media or sport of boxing. It's just Mike and I, and we make our way to these events and try to get you bonus content on location shows, especially here in LA gyms and Vegas. So we try to get you as much content as we can. So once again, for our guest of the weekend, Marquis Johns of BigFightWeekend.com. For my co-host Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last